What can Wing Chun teach us about sword fighting?
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
Wing Chun and some of its derivatives, such as Jeet Kune Do, but also others, have a mixed reputation among the martial arts. Some believe it to be the superior type of martial art, some believe it to be too specialized and not really applicable. I have trained myself some styles of Wing Chun, but trained with many more people that trained other styles. I'm more happy with Jeet Kune Do, but there is stuff to get from Wing Chun. And please stay with me, I will explain why and how. Wing Chun is especially very good at sticky hands and related drills. And although some schools say there's nothing like a sticky blade in Wing Chun, the principles of the sticky hand can be transferred to certain aspects of sword fighting, especially medieval European sword fighting. We have already transferred some aspects to the use of spears, videos linked in the description box, but now we want to go to the blade. Step 1, terminology. There are a lot of terms in Wing Chun and they're not used uniformly. So we need to talk a bit about words. Sometimes a term is used to describe the position of a hand, but sometimes the same term is used to describe a motion related to this position. This will be the first step we need to figure out or sort out before we can continue. Let's start out with positions. The first position is Bongzao and Bongdao. In German longsword, this position is similar to the Wacht. The way the names are written and spelled is a bit different in different styles. I always took the simple one. Second position, Fog. In German longsword, this is simply the Pflug or plow. Again, don't be surprised, some of these names will come again when we look at the motions. 3 is Gan, and this one corresponds to the Alber in German longsword. To complete the first subset of 4, we have Jam, and this one corresponds to a position that we have in half sword in German longsword, but there it's not really named. You could argue that it's a posta di donna derivative, but that would be then Italian, right? Second subset of 4 starts with Pak, and the German correspondence the Einhorn or unicorn. If you're interested why there are 2 subsets with 4, check the paper linked in the description box. Next up is Tog and the German longsword equivalent, the Hangetort. Next one may come as a surprise, but it's in all your synonym Tau forms and it's used defensively in VT, the Daioing. The German equivalent is well known as the Ox. And the Wing Chun guys know what's missing. It's the Tan and it's the Low Tan. We don't have that directly with the German longsword, but we often go through this position when we perform different techniques. Now we come to principles, and we always start with the position that has the same name as the principle. Tan means something like standing or resisting, and that means you don't move, but the body can move, and you push indirectly. We have that with the sword. The principle Pak pushes with the hand or the blade. Also, Chat is used in the same way in Wing Chun, but to have 2 names for one principle is a bit overcompensating. This we have with a lot of techniques with the longsword, repelling the blade, not to stay in bind and be able to continue with further attacks and cuts. It can be used in half sword, it can be used in normal hold, for example, for performing some of the master cuts. It's a common theme. Also, in Wing Chun, Pak Sao and Pak Dao are often used in many different situations, and it can be considered one of the basic principles that you learn from early on. Always trying to be scientific means we should predict a bit. We have now seen we can have the hand or the weapon in position, or we can push, move it forward. So the logical missing next element is pulling, and that principle is called lap. And we can already see this will not be so easy with a blade. Luckily, if we look at the Wing Chun knives, they have a special structure that allows to trap the blade of the opponent, and by that, in fact, have a kind of pulling motion. With a longsword, we can consider everything that goes in the direction of disarm or armbar as using this principle, because we are in fact pulling the sword out of the hand of the opponent. Next principle is gan, which means something like cutting. With the blade, this is not so much of a cutting, but it is what we usually call versetzen. So we have a bit of a sticky blade here, we stay in bind and move the weapon over to the next quadrant. This is of course something we regularly use when we have a longer blade and the German longsword, because this working in bind is a common theme. The next principle looks very similar at first, but where Gan is very active, Kao is more passive, taking the energy that comes in from the sword and redirects it minimally, more or less wriggling around the blade. This looks a bit dangerous, and it's not so easy to get that with the sword. It may relate to having force at different parts of the blade, but it's not easily explainable. And that also makes the next one a bit more tricky to interpret. Bong, as a principle, is basically reversed forms of Gan and Kao. So there should be in fact two types of Bong, a more active one and a more passive one, but that's usually not distinguished. We could not figure it out immediately. That will demand for a bit more research for the details. Maybe there's a spectrum of the two and we are somewhere in between. At least with a longsword, we sometimes seem to be more active and sometimes more passive. Also, the next principle could be part of such a gradient, or it is something really special. And that's Hün. It reminds of the Bongzao, but it does not involve the elbow, only the wrist. And with a Wing Chun type of knife, this seems to correspond to a flip. No easy correspondence with any longer blade without the special hilt. So did we learn something useful? Disclaimer 1, this interpretation here is my personal one based on a lot of different views on Wing Chun, and a lot of people will probably disagree about the details. But what I see is that there are in fact a lot of similarities between the principles and positions used in Wing Chun and positions and principle that are trained with the German longsword and other longer blades. Disclaimer 2, this is so far only a collection of ideas, so work in progress, and I'm open to suggestions from anyone to improve my view here. Hope we could inspire you. See you around next time.